Hello everyone. Welcome to the fourth of our Nature Calling conversations. These in-conversation sessions bring together artists and experts from across disciplines for conversations about artistic practice. Nature Calling conversations are part of a wider programme activity which has been happening across England between May and October this year. Do find out more on our website, which is naturecalling.org.uk. So for this fourth conversation, we've brought together Matt Rosier, the commissioned artist for the Chilterns National Landscape, and Matthew Shaw of Stone Club. Matt's project Luton Henge opened at the end of July with a full day's festival attended by hundreds of people from the local community. It's a brand new permanent henge for contemplation and celebration, situated on an old BMX track. The Henge Collective, supported by the arts organisation River Lea Arts, is a group of local volunteers who will be programming events at the Henge and rewilding the surrounding site later in the year. So in terms of quick introductions, Matt Rosier is an artist that creates public and immersive installations within communities and landscapes across the country. His practice often involves the public in both the creation process and the finished work, embedding himself in communities and places. Matthew Shaw is the co-founder of Stone Club, a community set up to explore prehistory and ancient sites through events, talks and walks. They run a regular night at the Social in London and pop-up events across the UK. Matthew is an artist, writer and poet. His book Atmosphere of Mona, a collection of poetry and photography, was published in 2020. He's worked on performances and art installations for a variety of places, including Barbican, Charleston House, Glastonbury Festival and Sea Change Festival. Matt and Matthew will be speaking for about 45 minutes before we take questions at the end. And please pop your questions in the Q&A and we'll get through as many as we can. So welcome, Matt and Matthew. Really nice to see you both. We are just going to start today's event with a bit of a slideshow of images from Luton Henge. And so Matt can give a little bit of an overview and contextualization of the project. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Corinza, and hello, everyone. So as Corinza was saying, the new henge, which is behind my head here, is a new community gathering space in Luton, in North Luton, in an area called Marsh Farm. And it is situated very close to a ancient earthwork called Waulud's Bank, which is roughly 5,000 years old. And it's a D-shaped earth enclosure, which incorporates the source of the River Lea. So there's 5 springs where it becomes a chalk stream, which then flows through Luton. So it's been a sacred site for thousands of years. Waulud's Bank itself sort of takes the form of a large, gentle hill and meadow, and it's actually quite unknown in the area as a kind of monument or its kind of history. So this evolution of the site, I suppose, I think of it as the latest kind of iteration of this sacred area and landscape, is almost a kind of modern signposting to this site and source of the River Lea. It is formed of a chalk stone circle comprising 8 stones, which are made of clunch stone, which is a harder form of chalk, which kind of holds together because it's full of other minerals and fossils. So it's a really rare type of stone that's just from a few miles away from here. And we got the last ever stones from this quarry, Totternhoe quarry, which have been quarried for, again, thousands of years, and is now a wildlife reserve. And they essentially allowed us to take the last stones from here, which are what you can see here. They have a compass orientation, so north, east, southwest, as well as signaling the largest tablet stone points towards the source of the River Lea, which is about 100 meters away, that the stone you see there. And in the middle, there's and it's also aligned to the solstices. Behind my head is the largest stone on the summer solstice, which was the first kind of intimate kind of community gathering moment here where the stones had literally been put up a few days before. And in the middle of the space is a hammered chalk center circle. So again, using a technique synonymous with this area of the Chilterns and across the chalk landscape of chalk sculptures in the landscape and artworks in the landscape, like the Uffington White Horse, etc. So for that, hundreds of hours went into of community volunteers hammering in that chalk center circle and this ceremonial path which kind of cuts through the BMX landscape, which we sort of thought of as a ready-made earthwork. It remains open as a BMX track, which is kind of fun. So you have now this mixture of BMXers and then also now people gathering in the center. We hosted a festival there. So that was its intention. That was the kind of end point of this stage of the artwork, I suppose, of this moment where people come together for a community festival in this space. It's used as an amphitheater, but things take place. It was quite an eccentric mixture of activity, but all very related to local community, which here in Luton's one of the most multicultural towns in Britain. And that was very much reflected in this day of all kinds of different events and activities coming here that you wouldn't necessarily usually associate with these kind of sites across the country, which are normally very rural and have, are much more related to kind of, I suppose, spiritual activities. We'll talk on, but that's a kind of brief overview.
Thanks, Matt. And for someone who's sort of seen that site evolve and become what it is, it definitely feels like it's been there for like a millennia already. So it's incredible. Matthew, I just wondered if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick overview of what is Stone Club and what's the role of Stone Club, and also how you see a project like Luton Henge either kind of fit with maybe contemporary practice or kind of is reflective of maybe things that might have happened that we might not, of recent time.
Yeah, sure. Well, Lally Macbeth and I started Stone Club in November 2021, and it largely came out of that period of lockdown, and then the excitement of being able to re-explore places a little bit further from home and to get back out to ancient sites again, which is really tricky for a period of time, as everyone remembers. And also, it came from meeting people and meeting some of the same people at various different ancient sites in Cornwall and thinking how interesting it was and how diverse the people were that we would meet. It wasn't just people that were going there because they were interested in the archaeology. It was everything from dog walkers to people that were there for spiritual reasons, people that just were local, and people that were just, on a long walk, perhaps. And I think we thought it might be really fun to give a couple of people membership cards. So we came up with this idea of giving people a membership card with the number of their membership and the date they joined, very much inspired by my love of the Dennis the Menace fan club and the excitement at 10 years old of getting the Dennis the Menace and Nasher badges and the secret jokes and things too. I thought it was very funny. So there's a sort of pop culture reference which we definitely should revisit with the BMX track aspect of this. And so we did that. We gave it to a few friends and a couple of people posted them up on Instagram. And then we were just we had this deluge of people saying, how do I get one? So we had to figure out how to do it. So the aims behind it, though, were slightly less frivolous than a recreation of the Dennis the Menace fan club. They were much more about trying to create an open and welcoming environment for anybody that had any sort of interest whatsoever in either connection with nature or and the purpose for that being getting to a stone. I'd been reading a lot and doing a lot of work around autism and having a goal, a reason to go out and to do things with children. So I was really interested in that as one aspect. But I was also horrified, as I still am, at the level of division in the country and the world, and wanting to find ways that people could agree on something and not disagree immediately based on any sort of like political or socio reason. And actually, if we could just agree that Stone Circle would be a cool place to go and have a conversation, that would sort of perhaps dissolve some of those things. And so the events that we set up were based on that same principle. We did create a set of rules, mostly for our own amusement, really, but there was, again, seriousness to it. The first one was to tell everyone about Stone Club, which was a fairly obvious thing to do once people had said they liked it. It was also a pop culture reference to Fight Club. We thought we'd just do the opposite. The second one was, what was the second one? I'm trying to remember what order we put them in. Stone Club is for everyone. It's the most important one, really, because when we did events, we really wanted to make sure that people came and they didn't feel they were intimidated, and people were still very scared of COVID at the time and crowded environments and health. A lot of people were wearing masks to the first events that we did. Other people were just really excited to be back out, and the mask was long in the bin. You know, they were sort of like, great freedom, life can resume. And we were trying to deal with the delicacy of that to make sure that everybody felt comfortable, but also from any sort of walk of life, age group, interests. And then we had a lot of conversations about how Lally would never be prepared for rain. In West Penwith, there's a lot of rain where a lot of the stones are, and she would always be there with no coat and no sensible shoes, let's say. So Pack a Mac and Pack a Snack really came from that idea. But yeah, really the intention was to re-engage people with ancient sites, but in a way that would take in all kinds of different perspectives.
Sorry, I was on mute then. Yeah, thank you. And again, you know, so here we are today with Luton Henge, a new stone circle. So yeah, I wondered what you felt about that then, this emergence of new stone circles today.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, you know, huge congratulations to everybody involved with the project, because what a phenomenal place it looks. I'm really excited to come and visit as well, and have all sorts of ideas about different things that might work there as well, Stone Club related. So we should definitely talk about those at some stage too. But I think there's a few things to say about it. I think the choice of the site as somewhere that obviously has such incredible resonance and significance historically is one thing. I think the fact that more recently it's been used by a community as a BMX track's really amazing, and the different sort of coming of age rituals that probably come with that as well over the years. And I love seeing all the photographs as well. I love seeing all the different types of music and things that have gone on in there. You know, immediately, even in such a short space of time, here's a place that's functioning as a new venue effectively in the landscape. Um, but I also think it asks lots of questions of us about what we are doing with place. You can see some of the tower blocks in the background there, so you can see modernity, and you can see what has the appearance of being an ancient site. Obviously, it's very new, but then the stones themselves are millennia old. So there's all of these different layers. It's quite complex. It's interesting with modern stone circles in terms of how they very quickly become adopted by people and loved by people. I think the first modern site that I was involved with was in 2011, when a stone circle was built on a site in Holton Lea, which is in Dorset, it's sort of between Poole and Wareham. And it's a livability charity. So it's a place that offers respite for people that really need it, and very vulnerable people as well. But it's also a place that has an RSPB nature reserve and bird hides, and really, really beautiful um, landscape. Lots of trees and lots of attempts as well to return it more to sort of native tree habitat, and to remove some of the conifers that have been planted over time. So it's got all these different layers to it that are really interesting. But what was most interesting was that about a month after the stones were put in place, and they were put in place originally because a perfumer wanted to, his friend had died, and he was really interested in looking at this cycle of death, decay, and renewal, and wanted to use something that sort of spoke to him about that, which was an interest, a growing interest at that time in ancient sites. And so the stones were perfumed, and people would smell the stones rather than put the perfume on their skin. But the intention behind it wasn't just as a marketing gimmick, it was very much to create something of permanence in celebration of his friend's life that had died, and the perfume, his form of artistic expression around that. But within a month, someone had had a hand fasting ceremony there, so a sort of, I guess, a sort of non-Christian wedding or pagan celebration of wanting to be with another person for a year and a day or forever. And very quickly I saw that lots of people were using it as a site as well to observe the equinoxes or the solstices or ceremonies that they put together with the community. And I thought how brilliant that was, that was the case. And that's just one, you know, there are a few others as well in different parts of the country. and they're adopted so quickly and used so quickly. I think that's such a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, I wonder if you could say a little bit about obviously the wider community in Luton and that you know of is adopting it, but also that really interesting crossover between you coming in as a commissioned artist to make something new, but then very quickly sort of kind of identifying this sense of the henge and all the kind of history and connection from the past. And I find the kind of time compression between this project really fascinating, between what we're talking about in the past and what we're talking about today, and actually what might be the same kind of process as well at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I very much saw it as at the heart of the artwork was mirroring a process that happened thousands of years ago, where people came together from across a landscape to build a monument for gathering, for community. We will never know exactly why, but for some kind, it was important enough to put that much collective energy into something at a time where it would have been so hard to do that. Um, and I think that feels quite rare and precious today. And I suppose it was finding, I suppose the stone circle, the henge became a kind of way of kind of creating that moment and that coming together. That was for me what was at the heart of it. And I think then when I was here and I was working with Revolution Arts, who are based right here next to the Henge site in a community centre, which is where I'm at now, which was set up by Marsh Farm Outreach, who were formerly Exodus Collective, who used to run, put on free parties around the Chilterns in chalk pits with, I think the largest one was about 10,000 people in the 90s. So incredible legacy of, and when I would be talking to them, and always in my mind was the kind of mirroring of all of these different periods of time where it is about creating these spaces where people feel like they can come together in the landscape and whether it's commune, whether it's party, whatever. And I think that's really what we were trying to do here. And I think the festival was a beautiful sort of first kind of demonstration of that. But importantly, the actual building process itself and the sort of many hands being involved in that and feeling like there has been an actual kind of coming together, whether that's hammering chalk or whether that's helping create the charred wooden benches that surround the site. There's a sort of outer ring of benches made of local wood, and that was very much led by Common Practice, an architecture studio based in Bridport and London. And Jack really spearheaded that kind of facilitation of people feeling like they can get involved with something, having no expertise, whether that's charring wood, sculpting, as well as then as leading these chalk packing days of people hammering in the chalk. And just the act of being involved like that, and then seeing this space slowly emerge over time together, I feel like has created that sense of collective ownership and feeling like something's happened together, which feels, as I was saying, quite rare in this day and age. And I feel like there's a real deep desire for it. And I guess in the work I do, it's about creating those moments or situations. But I'm feeling like there's a growing kind of desire and real need, as Matthew was saying, in the context of a world which feels so divided and where there is so little space for those coming together, or neutral spaces, I suppose. And I think a stone circle is the kind of one of the most ancient forms we have for that. And I think that's why it felt like the right type of space and monument to put in this context.
Yeah, it's really interesting that aspect, because I was just thinking as you were saying that about how so many new buildings or new structures or new places even are built for with someone in mind, or they're very commercially focused, or they have a purpose, but they're focused either um, on homes from a perspective, or their business from a perspective. But actually what you're doing here is something that has no other purpose really than bringing community together. That's its number one reason for existing. And also that there's such a freedom to that because it's the community themselves that decide how the site will be used and how it's looked after and what will be its legacy in time to come. And I don't know. It's interesting around the ancient thing. I'm just thinking about why particularly you chose that. I mean, you've expressed really eloquently what your motives were behind it, but it is interesting how looking so far back is such a current interest for us
Mm.
all. Have you seen this progress? Has this changed in your own artwork, your own approach to work?
Yeah, I think there's something which I guess in history books it will be clearer, but there's something around looking back in a progressive way at the moment, I think, of going uh, pre-nationalism, pre-organized religion, even where and seeing these kind of common forms and narratives in different continents all over the world appear. Um, Stone circles being one example of that, and I think there's this resurgent interest in that um, because I think there is this desire for a kind of uh, a way of connecting over kind of borders, different cultural backgrounds, whatever it may be. I suppose my own personal interest actually came from I did a residency in Japan in 2019, which was based at their the most kind of venerated shrine complex there called the Ise Shrine, which is a collection of about 120 wooden shrines, all made of cypress wood. Um, and they're ritualistically rebuilt every 20 years. Um, and so it's essentially the same form, they're the same designs and have been for about 1,500 years, but they're constantly new.
Mm,
And being there and then seeing how that institution was at the same time managing a vast forest, like mountains and mountains of forest, so that they could make sure that there was a supply of wood for future generations, hundreds and hundreds of years, just sort of absolutely blew my mind. Because what it showed me was there was this transference of culture, knowledge, care, ecological care as well, but most importantly, community around this ritual and this collection of buildings in and amongst the forest, which was felt so radical to me in that moment where it was a moment of the environmental crisis was kind of at its most kind of vocal point there in a way. And I came back and sort of felt that I want to create spaces that respond to this landscape, but can maybe not on such grandiose terms, but in small ways, try to impart that continuum, that feeling of wanting to care for an area of land over a long term, multi-generational, even whether that's chalk packing once a year, or whether it's people putting on a festival in this space once a year, or whatever, or people just hanging out, people BMXing there. Um, that's what felt really important to me and what I'm trying to do now through these works. And I guess in the same way, perhaps through highlighting these spaces and working with these spaces and responding to these spaces, Stone Club feels like it's in a way, in a completely different way, doing a
mm.
similar thing or responding to a similar feeling.
Well, I think, yeah, I definitely agree. I think for to have a membership that's made up of all kinds of different people was really what we really hoped for, and it's what we've got. Um, and I think there's something really interesting to me in motive around doing these things. So, you're very clearly an artist, but you're doing something that someone else might recognize as experiential archaeology. You're working with similar ideas, but you're not necessarily doing it from the perspective of just wanting to find out how things were done thousands of years ago. But there's enough of it in there, so that you, through the experience of doing this and the team you've worked with, will feel some of those same things, I think, um, because it's a momentous thing to try and achieve. I think also art in landscape has always been a part of it. there's a great friend of mine who passed away a few years ago called Brian Catling, who was a brilliant sculptor, painter, poet, author, Royal Academician. And we went to Wayland Smithy together, and he stood there and he said, "This is sculpture on a monumental scale. The people that put this here, they may have had a functional reason for why the stones were placed there, sight lines, or venerating in a certain way, because there was obviously a tomb aspect to that, but actually there was also something else. There was something about the way the stones were orientated and the power of that in the landscape that is something similar to what we call art today. It had to come from a similar place or instinct. And I think when you see a lot of ancient sites, they are so momentous, and it would have taken so much effort, and they are so visual. That's really interesting. But I also love the way in which you're incorporating, and what you said about the forest. I was thinking about hedge laying. I saw a talk recently about hedge laying, traditional hedge laying, how and how they're meant to be replaced every 20 to 30 years because it's the vigor of the new growth that creates the most effective hedges. And if you just leave it for thousands of years, it won't be there. If you leave it for even 100 years, it will die away and become weaker and less effective. And I thought that was such an interesting thing, and it does make me wonder what things we've lost. And perhaps this is all a sense of trying to remember something much more ancient that we've actually forgotten. And maybe an artist is the right person to do that.
I mean, if I was just referring to when we had a bit of a pre-meet, some of the things we brought up, and we talked about that role of the art or artist in sort of reimagining these sites, and and obviously, Matt, we can talk maybe a bit about your process around engagement. But I think what's been very evident within your project is, yes, Matt came in with like the concept idea, but actually it is the bringing in of all the different disciplines, the archaeologists, working with the Chilterns National Landscape, their knowledge of the land and the species and all the different elements that bring this space alive. It isn't just one, sculptural element. It's the everything. And so, this bringing together of disciplines, and again that kind of the approach of engagement when you have an idea, because there's a simplicity around the idea, isn't there? But actually it's become very, very complex very quickly.
Yeah, it did become complex in a beautiful way. But yeah, I mean, even just the process of taking a stone circle through the planning system is quite funny. And yeah, to speak a bit about, I think the Chilterns in particular, who Chilterns National Landscape, who sort of look after this amazing, massive national landscape, sort of mostly to the west of, but sort of going around Luton. And then within that, there's Luton, which kind of almost felt like, when you sort of look at it on the map, a bit like a kind of island within that, but is completely part of the same landscape. And I think what was interesting here is the henge became a sort of little microcosm of that landscape. So it's formed from this BMX track kind of mounds, which are made of rubble from probably a local building a couple of decades ago, which in turn actually makes the most perfect substrate for a chalk grassland meadow because it's nutrient poor. And then just below that, you have the actual chalk bed. So you have this kind of mini kind of chalk landscape in a way, and then we have these Totternhoe stones within that, and the wood around it as well. So I think in a way it's become this kind of exchange between this much wider landscape and this very urban setting. And I think it meant we had these kind of situations where there would be people from working on different landscapes with all this embedded knowledge from the Chilterns, whether that's archaeological knowledge or ecological landscape management, lending their time and their expertise often to bring it into this space. And then at the same time, the community here really lending so much passion and kind of care, and then like a lot of creativity, especially in how the space has sort of come alive in the festival and thing. And I think that's, for me, a really special aspect of this project, and about, I guess, the program that wouldn't have been able to happen without it. and it feels like a kind of exchange point in a way, which I think is quite interesting.
Has it attracted people in as well so far that you didn't expect, or have you had people that sort of come on board with the project, you know, from places you didn't expect them to come from? Is it all people in Luton? Have people come from elsewhere so far? I'm just really interested, like how people have been attracted to it, and who the people are that are sort of interested in it so far. Obviously, it's still really new as well, and I wonder how that will change over time. But I love the idea of an annual festival, for example. But I also love those slightly more informal gatherings, and also people that are just still using it as a BMX track too.
Yeah, I think people, I mean, it's majority people from the area. Um, but I think in particular, it's attracted a lot of people, like musicians or interested in music, artists, obviously, who kind of now see this space as one that can be used in a way which I guess evokes imagination, which this kind of space should and probably always did. But here it's on a scale where we also have this community center next to it. You have, you know, amazing facilities here and organizations to kind of to allow those kind of possibilities, which probably wouldn't be so manageable in the middle of a more isolated landscape, let alone having this kind of community density immediately surrounding. I feel like that's very unique and very powerful. And then in terms of the more unexpected, for me, it was funny because we were here with, you know, lots of the team, especially Jack, throughout the building process in those simultaneous heat waves. It felt like hammering chalk and wheelbarrowing stuff. And when the fences were up, there was a lot of people being like, what's happening here? Because suddenly, you know, people see change, and it's there's a fence around it, is part of this, what is a park being taken away. And then as soon as the fences came down and people started to sort of occupy the site, it was just beautiful. And over those weeks, and you know, during that time, like having people come up and be like, "Oh yeah, we had date night on that bench in the corner the other day," and then she was like, yeah, he told me that it's a surprise, like going to take you to the new best sort of my new favorite date spot. And so they sat there, and then someone else saying it's their new favorite smoking spot. Like you say, so you have this kind of crossover of, yeah, there's people coming at it with kind of maybe more arts interest or historical interest. But then I think a lot of the magic is people just who have walked past this site all the time, whatever, but have never really maybe gone into it. It's been a BMX track, but now it's just being used in all these different ways. And that's really exciting to me, and to see it occupied in that way. And particularly families, like at the end of the project, uh, where it's just trying to get the site kind of finished up. And I remember working late into one evening, but it was still light, and there was just all these like kids everywhere, and like uh, mothers kind of in there, just as their kids were all just like running all over the site. They offered to help, which turned out to be an absolute disaster because they spilt a wheelbarrow of mud all over the chalk center circle. But that was great, and that's what I've heard a bit from the guys in the community center here, is that it's been really nice to see how families in particular in the evening are sort of occupying the site, and it sort of becomes that kind of space. So for me, it's very much that like diversity of use and occupation and crossovers where the magic of a space like this lies.
It's absolutely fascinating to be at this point in a new stone circle and Henge's life, isn't it? Because we can't know what happened in the Bronze Age and what happened in the Neolithic in quite the same way. It's fragmentary at best. But actually, the way in which sites are adopted and used is so fascinating. And yeah, it really does intrigue, I think, in terms of how those different things come together. It's really brilliant as well in a modern setting, I think, how this can be the case, and how a site can be sort of loved. I wonder what influence it will have on where people will travel and other sites that people will want to go to. I can imagine, you know, if you grew up in Luton now and you're like 3 years old at the moment, by the time you're 10, you might say to someone, oh yeah, we've got a stone circle in Luton, and it will matter not a jot whether or not that's a Neolithic site or whatever. And maybe
Yeah.
people aren't even that interested. Maybe it doesn't even matter how old the site is if it's used and it's loved. But I also think there's something really interested in how it's interpreted from here on in, because you've created something here as a project and as an artist. But I can imagine it already exists, that people have taken stunning photographs of different sunsets and alignments, and people will draw, they'll paint, they'll do all sorts of other things that are based on this, and the influence will resonate outwards. I wonder how you feel about that side of things. Like, is this one of those things, a bit like when an author writes a book and then they have to let it go, and it feels like it's not theirs anymore in quite the same way, because it will be used. It will be used however people want to use it. Do you feel very connected to how it's used, or are you quite happy for people to take it on?
No, I'm very happy. I my I would like to be as surprised as possible by this site. I think the thing I do care about and want to hold on to is that it is there's a certain level of care embedded, whether that's, you know, especially around things like, you know, accessibility, signage, and making sure the site just stays clean and safe. I think that as a basis is actually really important. And when we had the first, um, I guess, kind of community gathering moment in this community center last December to kind of introduce the project and the different ways people can start to get involved. That was the thing that really came back loud and clear. It was very much, we were asking, what do people want from a henge on this site? And there was very little kind of, I read it, it's very little interest necessarily in the kind of aesthetic elements of it. It was very much about, how does this remain accessible, and how does it become a place that people can feel like they can genuinely use, and participate in into the future. So I do think that kind of basic kind of care is actually really important, and accessibility. Uh, I've forgotten what you were, the other part of what you were.
Oh, I mean, that's really interesting. I think as well, what that just brought to mind was ownership, not physical ownership, financial ownership, but ownership of a site belonging to people.
Mhm.
It might not belong as in, you know, I own this site, but I'm talking about a different kind of ownership. I'm talking
Yeah.
about ownership with responsibility and I suppose love for a place. And I think that's one of the biggest things that can transform how a place is looked after over time.
Yeah.
I mean, and actually, it just as we've got a few more minutes left, but something around legacy anyway, that we, and someone's just put a question in around, first of all, first question from Lorna, and she says, I love this project so much. That was a big thing, and especially the sense of community ownership and its attention to the geology, but was asking wondered what the plans were for maybe more performance in this space coming up, and how will the piece sustain as a site for new rituals and festivals. And I think it's just something we've touched on, that people do it anyway, or they find their new rituals, and that's lovely, and you kind of want that organic ownership and evolution. But it also has a kind of space, it's in a community space next to a community centre. Obviously there's an arts organisation in the background there, and there is a Henge Collective that was sort of set up through part of the process. So can we speak a little bit about legacy and ambition around legacy?
Yeah. I suppose, to speak a bit about the Henge Collective, so that was, we were kind of thinking about, like, how does this transfer from a kind of organizational ownership and leadership to something feeling more organic and grassroots. And I think that will be an ongoing process inevitably, but this should be here for a little while. So but yeah, so the idea of this Henge Collective, hosted here by Revolution, was yeah, of coming together with people who had really had particularly kind of lent a lot of passion and kind of care to the project throughout, to kind of just, lead on key questions like this of how does the site remain kind of accessible over the long term? How should it be programmed? Should it be about people booking in events here, or should it just be entirely informal? Where's the kind of middle, where's the balance there? And then obviously things like the festival and how that's programmed and the kind of balance of activities in there. And I hope that kind of grows with the project. But I think in terms of legacy, what we've done is very much demonstrate through a festival how it can be used now and how it can be that space, how the community centre here allows that to also happen and be supported. I would love for the idea of there being then a festival every year, or maybe multiples. We have solstices. And that could potentially be moments for that, but also others. It doesn't have to be associated always with what we traditionally associate a stone circle with. So I really hope that happens. But I think most important is the informal kind of legacy of how, one, for me, it was absolutely essential that people knew that it was still a BMX track. So, and it's actually become much more popular, it seems like, as a BMX track since then, because it has this kind of, it's drawn this kind of attention to it. It's like it's a beacon BMX track. So just things like that, I think, are really fundamental. And then it remaining a site that feels kind of safe and open, and then people use it however they wish. I think that's the most important part of legacy from my point of view. And then, as I was saying, we've set up these other kind of structures and experimented with these, and that will be an ongoing process because, there's no real rule book for how you set up these structures around stone circles built in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, it is so, it is such a hosting space, isn't it? And I think that's what's so lovely. It's become a destination, and it will become a destination for, like you said, the date night, to kind of maybe having a birthday party or something down there. So yeah, I think that is, there's so much more to come. And also, can you mention a little bit about, because there's still another element still happen with the henge, isn't there, with planting?
Yeah, so I mean, as I touched upon earlier, it kind of lends itself to a chalk meadow habitat. So we've worked on there's a plan to kind of establish the site fully as a kind of grassland meadow. So for example, grass from Waulud's bank, so the sort of ancient earthwork next to it, that's a wild a meadow, and hay from that's going to be put over the site in a few weeks, I believe, and then that will be raked off later so that it doesn't become too nutrient rich, but you get all of those seeds. So hopefully next spring, summer, we start to see evidence of that, because obviously now there's quite a lot of bare earth from where we had to disturb the earth, but also just around the site, there's already this kind of colonization happening of different wildflowers and shrubs and things, which is brilliant. So it's a process that's now just being more kind of deliberately guided towards. So hopefully people will be able to come here, walk through the chalk pathway, and be kind of surrounded by a very quintessential kind of Chilterns habitat, which I think would be really special to then have this performance space in the middle of that.
It's going to look wonderful. Just a couple more minutes, and Matthew, just wondered whether you wanted to sort of say anything more in reflection, but also maybe what's happening with Stone Club, and I know you've got some events this weekend.
Yeah, well, I think as a reflection, I'm just thinking how amazing it would be if there was the ability to be able to look at this site now from the future, which is, of course, is completely impossible. But it does offer, I think, multi-generational use. What's created here, there's such a perceived permanence with stone structures, I think, and I'd really love to be able to see how the site is interpreted in generations to come. It would be fascinating. But I think in terms of interesting things like folk culture and ancient sites, really what we're dealing with are places that have relevance in people's lives over generations. So and I think this has the potential to do so. So yeah, it really is tremendous in that regard. Yes, we seem to always be doing events at the moment, it seems. But yes, there's 2 events coming up this weekend where we're DJing, which we do occasionally, with some images of Cornish sites at the Gorseth on Saturday night when new bards will be invested in Cornwall. It's a bit like the Welsh Eisteddfod, and it's focused a lot around Cornish culture and Cornish language. And then on Sunday, a project that's not entirely dissimilar to what you've been doing, Matt, in Luton, but it's 3 monoliths that have been created by an artist called Robin Sullivan in and around Newquay. So there's one at Nansledden, which is a new housing development, one in the centre of Newquay on Barrowfields, which is in itself a protected landscape and about an old barrow cemetery above one of the beaches. So archaeological dig went on as a part of that to make sure no archaeology would be destroyed or harmed in any way for the placing of that. And the third is at Newquay Orchards, a community space. Yeah, and I think it's a really exciting and interesting time in terms of artistic response in relation to the ancient landscape, whether they're sites like Luton or whether it's this or Sight Hill in Glasgow, a site that's actually moved once already as well. I found that fascinating, a site that was once in one part in Glasgow, never really where the people that were looking at the astroarchaeology intended it to be, and now it's found a new home. So even over 20 or 30 years, this site has moved once already, which in itself is interesting when you think about the Bluestones and Stonehenge and Preseli and all those sort of things as well. Why were things moved? And I wonder how much of it we'll ever remember in generations to come. But there's a hopefulness in the thought of generations to come. And there's a hopefulness, I think, in artworks like this.
Yeah, I've been following the Newquay project with interest. It looks great, and whatever this movement is, I'm very much happy to be a part of it. And something that just occurred to me actually was I think it was almost exactly a year ago that I first was introduced to Stone Club, and I saw you doing an in conversation. I think it was at Charleston Festival. And I remember it being said in that we need more new henges. So I got there in the end.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely have to do something together in Luton for sure. And I think, yeah, if anyone wants to look at things, the Stone Club website is probably the best place to go, or Instagram. And there's all sorts of events. We're even going to Todmorden in October. We're going to the north, so we don't get to the north very often. It's often very sort of southern based. But I love the fact there's all sorts of interest right across the world, not just in the UK, but across the world. So it's exciting.
Yeah, actually, there was something you mentioned in our little chat earlier, which was around that universality, is that the word, of circles and the stone circles in particular, and how who was it? Was it you, Matt, or was it you, Matthew, who came across someone who it referenced something from their own cultural background?
Oh, it was it was me. It was Ellen, who is based at River Lea here. She told me that I think she said an elderly man was walking he said he walks past here all the time, and that these stones, when they're kind of shining, reminded him of the Kashmiri mountains from the kind of where they'd migrated from. So yeah, it was that was the sort of special sort of thing, those kind of connections.
And it's so fascinating how they are all around the world, isn't it? You just feel like it's such a kind of Stonehenge type of kind of culture, but it really isn't. I've just got a couple of questions, but yeah, sorry, Matt, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, when I was giving that introduction to the project back in December, I started with a slide of it was a crop of an image, black and white image of a stone circle, which looks sort of remarkably like Stonehenge, and then kind of revealed the rest of the photo, and it says it's based in it's from Libya. So there's sort of this, and then I showed a few different examples from different parts of the world of these kind of same forms kind of cropping up. I think it's a really important part of the project for me.
Okay, I've just got a couple of questions here. I got from Alicia. Have any poets been commissioned to respond to the new site across the country? Could be interesting. Maybe Rob Hopkins could do a future piece on the stones too. Well, we did have art. I mean, we haven't actually referenced that, which is probably to our shame. The kind of first half of the commissioning process with Nature Calling was with writers and poets. And do you want to speak a little bit more about our wonderful poet, Lee Nelson, Matt?
Yeah. So Lee Nelson was the commissioned poet, writer for this first part of the commission, and then I sort of followed on after that. But Lee's been, across the whole project, and is very local to here, and has been completely enmeshed in the project throughout, and I hope will be. But he was also my first introduction to this area and this landscape. He led a series of walks and would read poetry that he was responding to this landscape. And I, in particular, remember one of those first walks, and he read a piece of poetry, and everyone was in tears because it was right after, well, it was sort of towards the end of the riots last summer, and there was this fear of it coming to Luton, but it didn't. And Lee's sort of point, and kind of through this writing, was sort of showing that there's a kind of connection and communality, I suppose, here, that is special, and in the face of sort of those kind of that aggression. And I think all of his poetry and writing there has been then about kind of feeling like this landscape is part of you and us, and everybody has access to it. And it's really kind of emancipatory, I think, his writing and the way he's talked about the landscape. And then so he performed poetry on the solstice here in the Henge, and then also during the festival as well. So for me, they've been kind of like blessings, I suppose, of the site through writing. But yeah, I hope that those kind of traditions now sort of continue throughout the project, definitely, well, throughout its life.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's interested in hearing some of Lee's poems, they're all on our website on naturecalling.org.uk. We've got them listed, but we've also got some films of him reading them as well, which are great. They're wonderful performances. So thank you for that. I've got a message from Lucy, who worked on the project. So Lucy being Matt's producer and worked incredibly hard and brilliant on this project. So her really great reflection here. I think the concept of deep time is so relevant to this project and to all the great events Stone Club generates, and how it relates to the current climate crisis, how projects like the Henge and Stone Club can help situate ourselves within long time, looking forward in a big epic sense, and to make us really take on board our pressing obligation to future generations. So if you have any reflections on that. And it's true, I think deep time has been something I've become quite fascinated with through this as well, and that can really blow your mind. I just want to double check if there's any more. There's some great links there. Oh, someone from Simon. Has anyone been there to create field recordings yet? I'm sure the soundscape there is fantastic at dawn and dusk. Not that we know of, but maybe Simon, if that's what you want to do,
Definitely should.
Yeah,
it's a great idea to do. I think the deep time thing is also really, really relevant because, obviously it moves forwards and backwards, that idea, and it's actually very helpful to project, I think, as well, about where we're going and what we need to do now to avert climate catastrophe. I think, we're really concerned with those things. I think deep time, I probably became really aware of that through Stephen Harding at Schumacher College and the work that he was doing with deep time work and those kind of ideas. I do think it's really, really helpful to be able to have that experience and to think about things in that way. They are, it is the burning issue of our times, I think. It's easy for it to disappear in the news headlines and everything else around everything else that's happening in the world. And of course, those things are really important too and should be covered, perhaps not in the way they are, but they should be covered. And I think it's really important to think about the environment, ourselves as part of nature, and how we're responding to that. And everything, I think, needs to be considered in relation to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so much of Nature Calling has been that interconnection between the landscape, the projects that's been created, and then also people's role within that, whether it be communities or the effects of communities on landscape. So yeah, it's all, like you say, interconnected. So excuse me, I think we're going to wrap it up there. So first of all, thank you ever so much, Matt and Matthew. It's been really great to hear your reflections on this project. I just also wanted to do a bit of a plug. Excuse me, 1 second, take a sip. A bit of a plug for our next project, which will be Consequences in Dorset this weekend. So keep an eye out. That will be the arrival of a brand new giant on the hillsides of Dorset. And I mean, there's a bit of an overlap really in terms of with what we've been talking about today. This sort of reconnection to folks' stories, reconnection to land, and all the kind of mythology that comes through that. So keep an eye out for Consequences, which will be launched as of this weekend. So our next nature calling conversation will take place on Wednesday, the 24th September, and that's with the artist duo Instar, so Trish Evans and Nick Humphreys, and they're the commissioned artists for the Lincolnshire Chilterns National Landscape, talking about their project Shelf Life. We'll email you more details on that in the coming days, so put that date in your diary if you can. Just to let you know that today's session has been recorded and we'll be editing it into a bite-sized 20-minute podcast, which are now all available on our website and on Spotify. So if you'd like to listen to them and share it, that'd be great. As you leave, there will be a few feedback questions that pop up. So just please, if you wouldn't mind, taking a moment to fill those in. And thank you for attending. And I hope you have a great afternoon. So thanks again and lovely to see you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.